Hi, this is Ken Kerschbaumer of the Sports Video Group, and I'm here with James Dean, the CEO of ESL UK, as well as Weavr. So James, nice to meet you. So well, let's start with Weavr, because people may not, before we start how ESL is using Weavr, what exactly is Weavr?
So Weavr's a government project. They released £16 million and divided it into 4 to basically look at audience of the future. So with Innovate UK, we started exploring exactly how the millennials within eSports are now interacting with our content,
Right.
and how we can unlock that all-important media rights that eSports really hasn't seen. And I think this is one of the biggest kind of comparisons to the traditional sports industry we have in terms of monetization.
Gotcha. So looking at your demo, obviously a very data-centric project. So, and I think that was one of the things from the government was kind of how do we help data analytics and these kind of things. So talk about the flow of data, and then how it comes into Weavr, and I guess Weavr kind of weaves the data into.
Yeah, sure. You
right.
picked up on why we call it
There you
Weavr. It's great. So effectively, it's a B2B framework. What we identified was that there's a bunch of broadcasters, amazing broadcasters, and amazing platforms, digital platforms, that ultimately IP owners are looking to utilize in order to reach that fan base
Right.
in a very direct and personalized manner. So effectively what we felt was missing was the ability to, first of all, connect the two, connect the IP owner to those platforms and broadcasters, ultimately to the end user. But secondly, really try and develop that personalized narrative. And really the only way we can do that is through AI and machine learning. So Weavr is a consortium of a bunch of great companies and a university in York,
Right.
all pulling together this concept of using AI and machine learning to really deliver next level experiences for those end users. And ultimately, we're trying to get a bit of share of that purse,
Right.
to demonstrate what could be the future of media rights.
Sure. Okay, so one of those partners also is ESL.
Yes.
And there was the ESL one in Cologne, all right?
Birmingham to start with.
And Birmingham to start with,
Yes.
yeah. So walk through those two. Well, let's talk about how it changed the consumer experience, because I think people always it's hard for people to visualize
Absolutely.
what the end product is. So if you and I are in or we could be at home or in the stands, what is sort of our engagement with Weavr, and how does it kind of change the ESL experience?
First of all, the beauty about esports is obviously it's entirely digital. Like every single bit of data, all the assets within esports is preconditioned, pure data and
Right.
perfect.
Right.
So we have a massive opportunity to just kind of pull out whatever we fancy, and create new narratives that we feel is very specific to an audience. Now we chose a game called Dota 2, which is a kind of a map, 5v5, kind of 3D chess on steroids. And the idea is to kind of get each other's base. That's the premise of the game. Now, while these players are doing that, it's a very, very complicated process. And in fact, no one game can ever be the same. Every single game is unique in many, many different ways. And also, the games can flip really quickly because of maybe it's a slip up within the game, etc. But there's a lot of dynamics to the game. It's super complicated. So first of all, we addressed the hardcore fan. And the hardcore fan was really looking for that very, very in-depth, personalized narrative. So we started using AI, first of all, to do a lot of predictions. Predictions that esports certainly hasn't seen before, but also being able to use it to create a narrative, a personalized narrative. So I was able now, as a fan, to see a snapshot of the entire match in front of me, and be able to rewind, go forwards and backwards, etc., and snap to very important personalized moments within that game. So I'm able to say, well, I don't quite know what happened there, but I can snap back and it will give me literal text that I will understand personally because of my favorite team, my position I play or interested in, or the character, or the spell they just used, or whatever. And the number of options are just unlimited. And really, it's the use cases are unlimited as well. So.
Right. So you're really, and I guess basically the trick is, the world is full of data. Esports definitely full of more data than even regular sports because everything is data.
Yep.
So the goal is really to help visualize the data in a way that tells a story rather than having the fan have to kind of either figure it out themselves, or the ESL, or other esports operators not being even to demonstrate it, right?
So absolutely, and what we believe in for consumers, there's 3 levels of immersion. So the obvious immersion is that visual immersion. It's being able to like really dive into the environment and suck up the environment, the atmosphere.
Right.
But also, your linear feed and the talent narrative, etc. The second immersion is cognitive immersion. And that is all about the data and disseminating statistics, putting predictions in. We've got a great bit of research now that's being implemented which does the what if prediction. So literally you can reposition players or swap out spells, etc., and then actually look to see how that will change the prediction and see how a match could play out in a very different manner, which is super exciting. And then finally, it's the social immersion. So as a fan, we like to think we know it all, and we like to be empowered to tell our own stories. We like to have a bit of a banter with people who are supporting the other team, or your mates especially. We see that a lot in traditional sports. Mm-hmm. It's exactly the same in esports. So we want to be able to allow for more of that. And there's many use cases in which we can demonstrate it. One of the most exciting ones I was looking at is, say, for example, I'm a big Dota fan. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I might see something that happens in this big final, and I'll tweet it based on what I've just seen from the stats from the Weavr framework. But my friend doesn't have a clue what I'm on about. He kind of follows me on Twitter, and maybe plays a bit of Dota, but he hasn't got a clue. But if he clicks that link, the framework will then disseminate what's just happened in his language or her language. So cool. Suddenly he now understands what I'm talking about.
Right.
And that social immersion, allowing us to learn and also share and really create more conversation is really exciting. And there's one final example and use case, I think, which is quite specific to esports, is the fact it's so participation based. If you're a fan, a viewer, you will be playing the game for sure, or you used to play the game.
Right.
So actually taking that player data, which is also pure, we can compare your play with what's going on the main finals.
Right.
So maybe a statistic will pop up about a particular moment in the actual finals, but it will say exactly what you might have done or how you would have played that, and you'll learn along the way. I think in some traditional sports can do the same, such as cycling, for example, which is very participation based.
Right.
I think you could get a lot of stats from, say, apps like Strava, for example, and actually disseminate that in the same way.
Yeah, so let's talk about the traditional sports, because obviously a lot of our members are more involved with traditional sports than esports. So they can probably see the connection of the dots between what you're doing with esports to how it might relate to them. But let's take, you picked the sport. You wanted soccer, cycling, you mentioned cycling. So how do you see, they're gathering a lot of data. So how do you help them take that data and again, visualize it in new ways or put it to use in new ways?
In a very similar manner. I mean, this is an R&D project, right? So we're working with the broadcast industry directly. Doc 10 are heavily involved in the whole project. Next year, we need to identify a traditional sport IP to start showing examples in these use cases of what we've learned this year. And what we're looking for is effectively a sports IP that has access to as much data as possible and can figure out the licensing around that. The Weavr framework in no way is going to be going out and trying to collect this data directly. We really believe to be the connector and the AI layer, and ultimately push into other platforms that also Weavr is not.
Right.
So I think some of the confusing elements are the fact that obviously during the R&D process we have to show a consumer use case, but that's not what we see ourselves being in the longer term, because there are amazing platforms out there and amazing bits of technology and amazing data collectors, and obviously the IP are all looking to do a similar thing. So it's a kind of a consultation process, and we're sort of going out there and say, hi, we're here. Right. We've got some government funding to try some things out, and we've got some great people behind it. who's up for a bit of a laugh.
Yeah. So let's talk tennis, because we mentioned that in our little pre-interview. You go to a tennis tournament, any of them. IBM clearly is gathering a lot of data. It's being used for Hawkeye and all those other kind of things, and a lot of automated production, yada yada. So let's take tennis. So how would you change again that consumer behavior for or that fan experience, or even for the coaches and the players?
So the IP itself will get to a certain level of trying to explore these sorts of areas, but in our experience, they tend to be very siloed in terms of a delivery. So the amazing work that Hawkeye and IBM, for example, will be doing in that circumstance will deliver a particular several use cases. What we feel is that if that was then to extend to the Weavr framework, we'll open up a whole new bunch of platforms that maybe they hadn't considered before, even because maybe economies of scale or some sort of commercial sense would say, well, let's park that for now. But in this experimental journey we're on, we're able to say, well, no, let's give it a go. As long as IBM are happy and Hawkeye can provide something, and then we sort of layer on our bits, maybe we could create some sort of OTT overlay that they hadn't even dreamt of, and that could be personalized as well. So I think that's the point. We're in a very fortunate situation that as it's effectively an R&D fund, we can go in any direction we like, pretty much.
Right.
Certain things. But of course, the whole point is to explore how that technology can be harnessed and how those data collectors and how all those clever companies and people are doing things in their existing manner.
Right. And then predictive side, so for tennis, for example, you could do things like, so Federer's playing Djokovic hits the ball in a certain part on his serve, Federer is hitting a forehand return. At some point, you'd be able to sit there and say, okay,
it would predict the forehand return.
Right.
Yeah, so, or where he's going to place the ball, or it could even get to the point of what that performance index in terms of over the last X number of serves, he should have hit X miles an hour. That's the thing, and the beauty about it is that. You get these data analysts, and you get what York's done in their research around prediction techniques, which is really cutting edge. The white papers they're producing is gaining international stardom within the AI world, and you just don't know what it's going to spit out. And this is the beauty about it. So you pair that up with some clever people within the IP, who are those hardcore tennis people. They kind of know what the fan would be interested in if it was handed in sort of a menu card. So we have to basically explore that and say, well, yeah, pretty much anything's possible. There's no black magic involved, but as in black magic, not the company. The company. Black magic are involved, in fact, but the there's no hocus pocus, should I say, to actually put to create something. But what comes out of AI and machine learning is mind blowing. I suppose that's why we kind of invented it as humans. Right.
Okay. So last question. You mentioned you're still in the R&D phase for at least another year. So if someone's watching this or wants to get involved, what do they do?
Weavr.tv is our holding website. There's a way to contact us there, or any social media platforms if we're Googled, etc. But basically, we do need to find that new IP for traditional sport. So it really is an open invitation in that respect. And the beauty is that we can also do some commercial trials with the government's agreement. So we don't have to give all of this away for free to the consumer. So the IP owner is able to demonstrate that it can create an incremental revenue off the back of this. The framework's paid for, we're developing it, it's live, and ultimately at the end of next year, where we need to be is that the government needs to see that there's an overall economic uplift by us exploring and sharing our findings, but also they would like to see Weavr spin off into a commercial entity, of which we'll continue the work. And we're exploring business models such as a small revenue share on all those incremental revenues that we can build on top of all the amazing work that's already been done.
Excellent, great. Well, thank you, James, for your time.
Thank you.
Enjoy the show.
Cheers. Yes, I
See you soon.
really look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.